Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT9, and BT9 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on the Gallantmon deck. So the Gallantmon deck had a starter deck and had a little bit of support before the starter deck, and then come EX2 it had another huge wave of support to really help flesh out the deck, and in BT9 we get a whole new evolution line for us to be playing around with the X Antibody evolution line. So Gallantmon has just a ton of different support and tech and tools that we could try to lean into depending on what we have available to us and what we actually want to double down and focus on. But I personally think that Gallantmon is going to be a more aggro control style of deck where a lot of our abilities are trying to delete the opponent's Digimon, gain benefits for deleting the opponent's Digimon, and all of them trigger when we attack the opponent, or at least the majority of them are going to be triggering when we're attacking the opponent to be extra aggressive with. So it's a pretty decent deck. I don't think it's going to be hyper tier 1 meta competitive, but it's still a really fun and powerful deck that could really take the opponent by surprise if they don't fully understand what your cards are trying to do. So with all that said and done, let's get into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of Gurimon. So Gurimon is just the 5th Digitama. It could really be anything you want it to be if you even want to run a 5th Digitama, but Gallantmon, compared to a lot of other decks, actually does have lots of different ways for us to draw cards to make our deck even more consistent, and Gurimon is just another example of this. So it has this nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn. If this Digimon has 6,000 or more DP, then we get to draw one card, so it's just a simple way at helping us with our overall card efficiency. But the main Digitama of the deck is going to be another draw engine in the form of 4 copies of Gigimon. So Gigimon is going to be directly interacting with our Guilmons, Gallantmons, and Growlmons, so it's just an easier card to use to get that card draw with. So when we attack once per turn, if this Digimon has Guilmon, Growlmon, or Gallantmon in its name, then we get to draw one card, making him just easier to use. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Guilmon X Antibody. So Guilmon X Antibody has the alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve him for 0 on top of a Guilmon to be able to get his when Digivolving effect, which may or may not matter, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less. So at worst, just Digivolving for 0 and getting some cycling going is still pretty good, and at best, deleting the opponent's Digimon, again, is just leaning into the control aspect of what this deck wants to do. Then on top of that, it has a nice inheritable ability where it's just adding to the range of the maximum DP that our deletion effects will reach by 1,000, so that way it makes all of our higher stage cards or various other options that you could be running a little bit more effective. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Guilmon. So this is the EX2 version of Guilmon, and this is going to be the deck's dedicated digging tool. So it has the on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our deck, and then add a Growlmon or Gallantmon from among them into our hand, and one Takato from among them into our hand, and then place the rest on the bottom. So digging out our Growlmons and our Gallantmons is basically all of our higher stage Digimon, and on top of that he has a nice when attacking ability to be paired up when we Digivolve on top of them, where when we attack once per turn, if this Digimon has Growlmon or Gallantmon in its name, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 DP or less to add some constant control and removal for the opponent's low-level Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Guilmon. So this is kind of a flex spot. It doesn't necessarily have to be the promo Guilmon, it's just I like the promo Guilmon for some early game aggression when it lines itself up. So it has a nice when attacking ability of allowing us to draw 1 card, and if we pair this up with Gigimon, then we get to draw 2 cards when we're attacking with this card to help with the overall consistency of our deck to find our parts and pieces. But if you really wanted to on a budget, you could just play the BT2 Guilmon, just because it's another Guilmon by name and it has some good DP boosting when set up, makes it still just a really good card to use for a cheap alternative. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Guilmon. So this Guilmon comes from the starter deck, and this is a really good Guilmon to help us climb our stages with super efficiently, just because if the opponent has a level 6 or higher Digimon in play, then we get to use this card to be able to Digivolve into a Gallantmon. So just Gallantmon, not Crimson Mode, not X Antibody, not Chaos, just a Gallantmon from our hand by paying 4 and ignoring the Digivolution requirements, so that way we could warp from a level 3 all the way up into a level 6, which is pretty fast on tempo. Then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability where it's just more card draw for the deck to use, making Gallantmon one of the best red decks to, well, draw cards with. So during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, whether it's by card effect or battle, doesn't really matter, then we get to draw 1 card, making him just a really good hyper-synergistic card with how the deck wants to play. Next, on to the level 4s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Agunimon. So this is another flex spot for the deck. If you really wanted to run any other level 4, then this is the spot to do it with. It's just, I feel like Agunimon having that hybrid for game factor is still really nice, just because we could use him to Digivolve on top of one of our red Tamers as if it was a level 3 Digimon. So we want to try to break the opponent's security as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. And then if we have the memory to do it, then we're just going to use our Tamers to Digivolve into a hybrid and swing for the game, and that's the whole goal and intention on utilizing Agunimon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Guilmon X Antibody. So at worst, Guilmon X Antibody is just your average level 4 Digimon with a decent inheritable ability, but he does have an alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve him on top of a Growlmon for 0, so we could get some more cycling and start stacking our abilities a little bit better. And then what this Growlmon is doing is he's just adding to the overall DP range that our deletion-based DP is going to be reaching by an extra 1,000, so we pair this up with the Guilmon X Antibody, and that's a 2,000 boost to the range in which we could delete the opponent's Digimon with. And then the best base Growlmon that we have currently to be working with is going to be the starter deck version of Growlmon. So the starter deck version of Growlmon just helps with our memory management because he has this nice ability where during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, again, doesn't specify by card effect or by battle, then we get to gain 1 memory to make our cards a little bit more efficient than they might normally be. Next, on to the level 5s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of WarGrowlmon X Antibody. So WarGrowlmon X Antibody is another X Antibody, so it could Digivolve for 0 on top of our other WarGrowlmons. Then the bonus for wanting to try to use this card is with his when Digivolving ability, where until the end of the opponent's turn, 2 of the opponent's Digimon gain an on-delete ability where they get to lose a memory, which means if we're actually able to delete the opponent's Digimon, then we get to gain that memory. And then on top of that, if Growlmon or X Antibody is in this Digimon's Digivolution sources, then we get to choose your opponent's Digimon whose total DP adds up to 6,000 or less and delete them. So it's just trying to stack the ability to gain some memory when we delete the opponent's Digimon on top of having a way to delete them himself. And with our DP extensions, we are able to delete more than just the 6,000 that he's currently targeting. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of WarGrowlmon. So this is one of the primary bases that we want to use with a WarGrowlmon X Antibody. So he has a when attacking ability, which is pretty nice for some extra control in case we want to be aggressive with this card, because he just does naturally have 8,000 DP, which is a little bit higher than your average level 5. Where when we attack with this card, we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a 4,000 DP or less. Then if we have a red Tamer in play, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less instead. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability for our WarGrowlmon X Antibody to use, where it's like the Growlmon X Antibody and the Guilmon X Antibody, where we're just adding 1,000 to the maximum range in which our DP-based deletion effects will be targeting. And for the similar style of reasonings, I'm also going to be running 2 copies of WarGrowlmon from the starter deck. So if you wanted to max out on one versus the other, by all means do so, but I do like the split so that way I could try to toolbox my abilities. So what WarGrowlmon is doing from the starter deck is he has just an easy when attacking ability to be aggressive with, to also control the opponent's field by deleting one of the opponent's Digimon with 3,000 DP or less. So it's just some good small body removal, and we could extend the reach of this with our extenders to be able to delete some stronger possible targets. Then on top of that, what we're really trying to utilize the card for is the fact that he has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn once per turn, when your opponent's Digimon is deleted, then this Digimon gains security attack +1, so that way when we attack, we're going to be punching the opponent's security a little bit harder than we normally would. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Gallantmon X Antibody. So Gallantmon X Antibody really does change how the deck wants to be played to be a little bit more centered around him. So he does have the alternative Digivolution condition where we could Digivolve him for 1 on top of a Gallantmon. So his when Digivolving ability states that we could delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP, and if no Digimon was deleted by this card effect, then we get to unsuspend this Digimon. So we either get to kill one of their Digimon or unsuspend them for an extra attack, and that's still just really powerful levels of utility, on top of the fact that we could use that to be extra aggressive with. Then, on top of that, his secondary ability states that during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, doesn't state by card effect or by attacking into it, if we have a Gallantmon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then we get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack, acting as some good burn for the opponent to be able to try to clear out an attack for the game that way. And then the best base Gallantmon that we could use in combination with Gallantmon X Antibody is going to be 3 copies of, well, the starter deck Gallantmon. So not only is this the best budget option, because you just need to get the starter deck to build the majority of this deck, and a lot of cards from EX2 and BT9, which shouldn't be that bad on your wallet, but this card is still just a really good card at adding some extra punch that a lot of the other Gallantmons don't have because he natively has security attack +1. So even if we don't see our Gallantmon X to be able to utilize off of this Gallantmon is good enough to just try to punch the opponent's security as best as we possibly can, because his when attacking ability is also pretty nice, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less, and again, we could combine this with all of our DP extenders to be able to increase the range of which he's trying to be able to delete, or at worst, if he's not deleting anything at all, then he's getting a plus 3000 DP boost, making him 14k security attack +1, swinging onto the opponent's security, which is pretty strong. And then the last Digimon of the deck in only level 7 is going to be 2 copies of Gallantmon Crimson Mode. So Gallantmon Crimson Mode is for the most part a game finisher, just because, well, we're going to be using his ability when we Digivolve up into him to delete all of the opponent's Digimon with the highest DP, so it's just helping us do the classic level 7 thing on getting rid of the opponent's Digimon and trying to have their trash be as healthy as it possibly can for his when attacking ability, where we get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack and add 1 to the possible cards that is being trashed by this card effect for every 10 cards in the opponent's trash. So the more cards they have in their trash through our deletion-based abilities or their own abilities themselves, then the stronger this card will be at punching the opponent's security, and that's kind of the whole goal and intention on why we're utilizing the cards that we are, to either A, punch the opponent's security really hard, or B, try to burn the opponent's security and get some residual punch in afterward. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Red Memory Boost. So Red Memory Boost isn't necessarily 110% needed for the deck, but it does help with its overall consistency, and Gallantmon is, again, one of the more consistent red decks. So what's a little bit more consistency harming to the deck, where we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our deck and add a red Digimon from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in any order, with this card going into the battle area to set up its secondary ability of Delay to gain 2 memory at a later turn. So this could even search out our level 7, which is what makes our level 7 a little bit better, on top of the fact that our level 7 is also a Gallantmon, so it could be searched off of our Guilmon. So it's just a good card to help us be able to set up more powerful lines of play. And then the last option of the deck I'm going to be running is kind of a flex spot in the form of 2 copies of X Antibody. You don't necessarily need to run X Antibody, it's just I like running X Antibody anyway, just because it helps with the overall combo potential on what we could do with our deck. So its security ability states that we get to gain a memory and add this card into our hand, so it's also a good anti-tempo security threat, on top of the fact that it also allows us to place this card underneath one of our Digimon without X Antibody in its Digivolution source to act as some solid protection for its inheritable ability, where during all turns, effects it won't be able to trash X Antibody from its Digivolution source, so we'll always be able to utilize its when attacking inheritable ability to be able to Digivolve a Digimon into a card with X Antibody in its traits from our hand. without paying its Digivolution cost. So that's super important because we could swing with our base forms and then be able to Digivolve into our X forms, and on top of that, if we do just have a base form, we could swing and Digivolve into the next stage X form all in one attack, which just adds some extra value and potential on how we could possibly utilize our cards. And then as far as the Tamers go, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Tai Kamiya. So if you wanted to use Hero as a budget replacement, by all means do so. Hero is still a fantastic Tamer to use, but I do just like the extra punch factor that Tai adds, just because Gallantmon doesn't necessarily have as much punch as some of the other red decks. So this is just going to be acting as your memory setting Tamer as the primary use, so that way if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just always hard set it to 3, and on top of that, as long as our red Digimon has 4 or more Digivolution sources in it, then it gains Security Attack Plus to make our punches a little bit stronger when we're attacking onto the opponent's security, and again, this does work with our level 7 because our level 7 is still a red Digimon. So Tai is just a fantastic card to add to the overall damage output on what the deck is trying to do. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Takato. So Takato is another really good card to help with our overall memory management, because during your turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, then we get to suspend this Tamer to gain a memory to make more powerful follow-up plays with, on top of just making some of our cards cheaper and more efficient to use in general. Then on top of that, the main effect that we're trying to gain out of this card is the fact that during your turn, when one of your Digimon would Digivolve into a Guilmon or Growlmon in its name, then that Digimon gains the Wind Digivolving ability of Blitz for the turn, so that way we're not necessarily afraid of being able to pass the memory onto the opponent's side, and we're still going to be able to attack and get the value off of our Gallantmons. And then the last Tamer of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Cool Boy. So Cool Boy is kind of a flex spot for the deck, but with all of our X Antibody cards, he's still a super good card to act as another consistency tool, where on play, we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 card with X Antibody in its traits, and 1 option with X Antibody in its traits from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So just because we're running lots of X Antibodies means that we have the potential to be able to add those cards into our hand. And this card's really good for utilizing our X Antibodies because his secondary ability states that during your turn, when one of your Digimon Digivolves into a Digimon of the same level with X Antibody in its traits, then we get to suspend this Tamer to gain a memory and draw 1 card, making our plays even more powerful and potentially more effective and efficient than the opponent might be anticipating. And then there's still just a lot of different tech and tools that we could add in the deck to really customize it to not only match our budget, but to match what we are trying to gain out of the deck. So again, if you want a budget replacement for the promo Guilmon, or you just want an extra Guilmon to run, then we have the BT02 Guilmon to help with our overall DP management. Then as far as some other level 4s that you could be playing, you could play any of the other Growlmons that we have. So I'm going to be highlighting the EX2-001 because I do think he is just straight up better than the BT2 Growlmon, but you're open to those cards as well just because of all of the Guilmon and Growlmon based synergies that we're already playing in the deck. Then if you do just want one of the best, if not the best generic level 4 in the game, you could just run the starter deck Gurimon for some extra security attack plus. Then on top of that, if you really wanted to, you could even run the Rise package. I think that's a little bit less consistent, but it still fits in the deck nonetheless just because we're trying to play our Tamers, and it extends the reach and range of our DP base deletion effects with some DP minus while setting up our Tamers, and Rise Gurimon X Antibody again just helps us set up our Tamers, deletes the opponent's Digimon, and on top of that makes himself a little bit stronger for us to use. Then if you want some other Gallantmons, I do think that the other 2 Gallantmons still are pretty strong in their own regards, so you could run the BT2 Gallantmon to act kind of like a mini version of Crimson mode, where you're just going to try to swing with him and delete the opponent's security based on the amount of cards that they have in their trash. And we also have the EX Gallantmon as another really good Gallantmon to extend the reach and range of our deletion-based effects. Then if you just want a generic level 7 for the deck to use and you don't feel like you have access to Crimson mode or don't want to run Crimson mode, then Blitz Omni is still just that good, just because, well, Blitz for game on top of the unsuspend to actually be able to attack is just that good. Then if you wanted to add in some spice to try to help with the deck's overall consistency and flow, then Gallantmon is still a really good card to consider because of the Guilmon based synergies where we could just cheaply and effectively throw him onto the field. Then as far as some really good alternative options to think about, we have a delicate plan to make our punches into the opponent's security a little bit safer. Even though most of the time we're trying to burn the opponent's security rather than actually check it, we're still wanting to check the opponent's security, so it's just making those plays safer. Then we have a wide variety of really good removal options. So if you wanted to Crimson Blaze to help shut off the opponent's security Digimon out of their security, or some of their card effects to play Digimon through card effects, is really good, on top of being able to delete 6k or less, which we could extend the reach to make it even stronger. Then we have Atomic Megaloblaster as another really good card to try to help it deal with wide boards, and we could extend the reach of this card also. Or if we don't care about extending the reach and we just want any target gone, then Gaia Force is still just that good of a card to use, on top of the fact that we do have various other boost options in the form of Lightning Joust to help increase our DP and deal damage to the opponent's security. Or at worst, if you really wanted to, you could run something like Judgment of the Blade to be able to attack into the opponent's Digimon that are unsuspended to be able to delete them that way. Even though we won't have piercing, just getting bodies off the field is still super important. But it's less important just because of the fact that we could just increase the range of our DP-based deletion effects and just delete the Digimon outright. And then one of the best, if not the best, alternative memory-fixing Tamer to Tai, as I mentioned before, is going to be Hero, which is also helping with our overall DP management to be able to make our Digimon even stronger than they normally would be, as long as they're level 5 or higher. But if you wanted to, you could even splash in a little bit of Gamamon, just because Gamamon's interacting with Red Tamers, and that's something Gallantmon already kind of wants to do. But yeah, for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a really solid core or shell for a Gallantmon X deck in BT9. I don't think the Megidramon stuff is that important anymore, just because we're more focused around Gallantmon X and our more hardcore Gallantmon synergies, and in this style of meta where the opponent most of the time is probably going to hide their Digimon in raising, it really doesn't matter if Megidramon comes out or not, on top of him being a little bit more expensive and less efficient than some of the other cards. Even though the EX2 Megidramon's ability to be able to play a Takato and Guilmon is really nice, it just won't matter when the opponent moves their Digimon out of raising, which is why I'm leaning less into that and more into the Gallantmon-based synergies. But I do like all of the interactions that this deck has, not only just at being a really good, consistent red deck, because of all of the different forms of card draw, but the control and punch factor is still all there, making him a very cheap and appealing deck for anyone to pick up, because a lot of the good parts and pieces are coming from the last two sets and a starter deck. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.